For John Cox, the road to the presidency of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials has a humble beginning.
Having had the privilege of being in public service for a little over 35 years now, you know, on the one hand, I would tell you that I'm humbled by, and yet at the same time, I'm very proud of the past that I came out of. I grew up in a small town, kind of on the wrong side of the tracks in some respects. Then eventually, was able to live up to a determination that I made when I was just a kid, that I wanted to be a law enforcement officer, I wanted to be a police officer.
For most of his professional life, Cox has carried a sidearm, from street-level cop to commanding officer of the Wyoming Highway Patrol.
You've got family, friends, and loved ones. Exercise your right to live. Please, buckle up.
Cox's career has prepared him for leadership. In 2005, he was tapped to lead the Wyoming Department of Transportation, and 6 years later, current Wyoming Governor Matt Mead asked him to stay on. Then in 2014, the AASHTO Board of Directors elected Cox to serve a one-year term. His top priority as president will be to help persuade Congress to approve a multi-year transportation bill.
If inaction continues, it really is the end user of the system. It's the taxpayer that is losing out on this. They have a right to expect a return on their investment, paid for in fuel taxes and user fees, to have a system that lives up to the kind of investment that they're making on a very individual level. So it really has consequences all the way down to every single person who's behind the wheel of a car who is dependent on the system in any of its forms.
In 2013, the Wyoming legislature voted to increase the state's gasoline tax by 10 cents a gallon. On the Wyoming DOT website, citizens can find a list of dozens of transportation improvement projects being paid for by the millions of dollars generated from the increase.
The final thing that I think was very significant, and it really was on a Wyoming scale, was that some very senior leaders that at one time had been skeptics of the department and what we were in our message, some very powerful legislators stepped up and said, we've got to do something, we've got to do it now, and the fuel tax is the best device with which to do it. And to be honest with you, it's always seemed to me from a distance that they probably paid a considerable price in terms of political capital to pull that off. But that's how that happened. So it was you know, on the one hand, you could say, well, you know, geez, if Wyoming can do this, maybe anybody should be able to, but I would tell you it was a brutal process, and it required a lot of courage on the part of a lot of people.
Cox says it will take a lot of political will in Washington to increase federal investment to repair and maintain America's aging transportation systems. He says transportation investment creates jobs, moves the economy, and gives people and businesses the mobility they need. Cox recognizes that federal investment is critical, but he says the nation must continue to explore the need to identify and advance reasonable opportunities to enhance state decision-making authority and limit federal regulation.
Every time a rule or a mandate is passed in federal law and results in additional federal control, it very seldom results in anything being done cheaper or more efficiently or quicker or with better stewardship even at the local level. I don't think anybody in my position across the states would say, just give us the money and get out of here. You don't have anything to say about any of this. What I am saying is that this needs to continue to be a very balanced process where the state really needs to stay behind the steering wheel on how they take care of their assets and deliver on a promise to the citizen.
Cox will serve as AASHTO president through September 2015. Meanwhile, the clock is already ticking down to May 31st, when the extension of the current federal funding law expires. Can Congress pass a new surface transportation reauthorization bill this year?
I think the short answer is I'm guardedly optimistic. And the reason I say that is because similar to what we saw in a very small piece of the U.S., What we're seeing on a national level is that the awareness among key players in Congress is at a higher level today than I've seen in the time that I've been director. It at least can happen. Let's see what we can do to contribute in a positive manner toward it actually happening.
John Cox, Director of the Wyoming Department of Transportation and AASHTO President for 2015.